Tusan was crouching in the garden, her hands covered in soil, the freshly tended vegetable bed still carrying the scent of damp earth. She tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept drifting back to Sun, making her movements inconsistent, sometimes too quick, sometimes too slow. While she was trimming a few worm-eaten leaves, she heard a familiar motorbike stop at the gate. She turned and saw Hai walking in, his warm smile easing the late afternoon heat. He was carrying some fresh fruit, saying he finished work early and wanted to drop by to check if she was tired or feeling down. Seeing her bent over the garden, clothes stained with dirt and hair sticking to her forehead with sweat, he felt a pang of tenderness. Without another word, he took off his jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and crouched beside her, helping pull out weeds and mound soil around the young plants. They worked together for a while, but Hai quickly noticed something was off. Today, Tusan was much quieter. When he asked her a few questions, she only nodded lightly, her answers distant, her eyes dodging his, as if hiding something. He set the hoe down, turned fully toward her, his voice gentle but steady. "Tusan, you're different today. Something happened, didn't it?" She froze, the pruning shears stopping midair. A faint, uneasy fear flickered in her chest. She didn't want to talk about Sun. She didn't want to worry Hai, nor bring trouble into the fragile peace she had finally found. She bent down to fix a vine back onto its support and quietly replied. "It's nothing. I'm just overthinking." But Hai wasn't convinced. He stepped closer, brushed away a few strands of hair stuck to her forehead, his eyes both firm and warm. "If something's bothering you, you must tell me. I don't want you facing anything alone. I'm here to protect you, to help you." Those words made her chest tighten. His sincerity and gentleness slowly softened the wall of worry inside her. She looked up and met his steady gaze, her heart stirring even more. Tusan gave him a small smile, filled with gratitude but also with an unspoken hesitation. She nodded faintly, like a fragile little promise. The following days. In the days that followed, Sun kept finding excuses to pass by Tusan's house, pretending it was coincidence, when in reality, he was watching her. Sometimes he stood behind a tree across the road, other times he sat on his motorbike at the entrance of the alley, eyes glued to the small gate she walked through every day. Occasionally, he followed her to the market, keeping just enough distance to avoid being noticed. He watched everything, the way she bought vegetables, the way she chatted with neighbors, and especially every moment she met Hai. If they stood too close or talked too long, anger and jealousy would flare up inside him like a burning flame. He wanted to know how close they had become, how often they met, and whether he still had any place left in Tusan's life. But Tusan had no idea. She lived as usual, thinking her recent worries were just the usual busyness of daily life. She didn't know that beyond her gate, a pair of eyes was silently following her every step, every smile. Sunday arrives, the day Sun promised to visit Ivy. Early Sunday morning, before the sun had fully risen, Tusan was preparing breakfast for Ivy when she suddenly heard a loud voice outside. Sun's shout echoed through the yard, impatient and excited. "Ivy! Daddy's here!" Startled, Tusan hurried to the door. Sun stood there looking unusually anxious. But he had arrived far too early, so early that Ivy wasn't even fully awake yet, and breakfast was still cooking on the stove. Feeling awkward, Tusan said softly, "You're too early. Ivy hasn't had breakfast. Could you come back a little later?" But Sun instantly shook his head, voice firm. "No need. I'll wait for her inside. If it's time to see my daughter, I'll wait." His tone made Tusan pause. That uneasy feeling she'd been having all week rose again. She didn't like the idea of him entering the house at this hour. But he was Ivy's father, she couldn't just refuse outright. She stood there for a few seconds, searching for an excuse, but none seemed reasonable. In the end, she stepped aside and opened the door wider, her voice softening reluctantly. "All right, come in. But Ivy is still eating breakfast. You'll have to wait a bit." Sun walked into the house without hesitation, his eyes sweeping the room as if searching for something, or someone. Tusan stood behind him, instinctively clutching her sleeve, that invisible anxiety swelling in her chest once again. Tusan was crouching in the garden, her hands covered in soil, the freshly tended vegetable bed still carrying the scent of damp earth. She tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept drifting back to Sun, making her movements inconsistent, sometimes too quick, sometimes too slow. While she was trimming a few worm-eaten leaves, she heard a familiar motorbike stop at the gate. She turned and saw Hai walking in, his warm smile easing the late afternoon heat. He was carrying some fresh fruit, saying he finished work early and wanted to drop by to check if she was tired or feeling down. Seeing her bent over the garden, clothes stained with dirt and hair sticking to her forehead with sweat, he felt a pang of tenderness. Without another word, he took off his jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and crouched beside her, helping pull out weeds and mound soil around the young plants. They worked together for a while, but Hai quickly noticed something was off. Today, Tusan was much quieter. When he asked her a few questions, she only nodded lightly, her answers distant, her eyes dodging his, as if hiding something. He set the hoe down, turned fully toward her, his voice gentle but steady. "Tusan, you're different today. Something happened, didn't it?" She froze, the pruning shears stopping midair. A faint, uneasy fear flickered in her chest. She didn't want to talk about Sun. She didn't want to worry Hai, nor bring trouble into the fragile peace she had finally found. She bent down to fix a vine back onto its support and quietly replied. "It's nothing. I'm just overthinking." But Hai wasn't convinced. He stepped closer, brushed away a few strands of hair stuck to her forehead, his eyes both firm and warm. "If something's bothering you, you must tell me. I don't want you facing anything alone. I'm here to protect you, to help you." Those words made her chest tighten. His sincerity and gentleness slowly softened the wall of worry inside her. She looked up and met his steady gaze, her heart stirring even more. Tusan gave him a small smile, filled with gratitude but also with an unspoken hesitation. She nodded faintly, like a fragile little promise. In the days that followed, Sun kept finding excuses to pass by Tusan's house, pretending it was coincidence, when in reality, he was watching her. Sometimes he stood behind a tree across the road, other times he sat on his motorbike at the entrance of the alley, eyes glued to the small gate she walked through every day. Occasionally, he followed her to the market, keeping just enough distance to avoid being noticed. He watched everything, the way she bought vegetables, the way she chatted with neighbors, and especially every moment she met Hai. If they stood too close or talked too long, anger and jealousy would flare up inside him like a burning flame. He wanted to know how close they had become, how often they met, and whether he still had any place left in Tusan's life. But Tusan had no idea. She lived as usual, thinking her recent worries were just the usual busyness of daily life. She didn't know that beyond her gate, a pair of eyes was silently following her every step, every smile. Early Sunday morning, before the sun had fully risen, Tusan was preparing breakfast for Ivy when she suddenly heard a loud voice outside. Sun's shout echoed through the yard, impatient and excited. "Ivy! Daddy's here!" Startled, Tusan hurried to the door. Sun stood there looking unusually anxious. But he had arrived far too early, so early that Ivy wasn't even fully awake yet, and breakfast was still cooking on the stove. Feeling awkward, Tusan said softly. "You're too early. Ivy hasn't had breakfast. Could you come back a little later?" But Sun instantly shook his head, voice firm. "No need. I'll wait for her inside. If it's time to see my daughter, I'll wait." His tone made Tusan pause. That uneasy feeling she'd been having all week rose again. She didn't like the idea of him entering the house at this hour. But he was Ivy's father, she couldn't just refuse outright. She stood there for a few seconds, searching for an excuse, but none seemed reasonable. In the end, she stepped aside and opened the door wider, her voice softening reluctantly. "All right, come in. But Ivy is still eating breakfast. You'll have to wait a bit." Sun walked into the house without hesitation, his eyes sweeping the room as if searching for something, or someone. Tusan stood behind him, instinctively clutching her sleeve, that invisible anxiety swelling in her chest once again. Sun stepped into the house and immediately scanned every corner, his eyes observing each little detail as if he were investigating something. The way he looked around made Tusan feel a wave of discomfort. She had no desire to share anything with the man who once betrayed her and treated her so poorly, so she simply turned back to the dining table and continued feeding Ivy small spoonfuls of porridge. She wanted everything to go quickly, for Sun to take the child out and then leave. But unexpectedly, it was Ivy who made the atmosphere grow tense. Since birth, she had never truly been held or comforted by her father. Sun had always been absent, aloof, and his rare visits meant Ivy had never formed any bond with him. The moment Sun walked in, fear washed over her face. Her eyes widened, and the little hand holding the spoon began to tremble. When Sun reached out his arms, forcing a smile in an attempt to look friendly, Ivy instinctively pressed herself against Tusan, her eyes welling with tears. Seeing that made Tusan's heart ache. But Sun didn't care. He stepped closer, and despite Ivy trembling and crying, he still tried to pick her up with stiff, awkward movements. Ivy burst into tears immediately, gripping her mother's shirt, her tiny body shaking as if hit by a cold gust of wind. Unable to bear seeing Ivy so terrified, Tusan moved forward at once, her voice firm. "Wait a moment. Let her calm down first. She's scared." But Sun looked displeased, still trying to keep Ivy in his arms. Tusan bent down to meet her daughter's eyes and gently asked, "Ivy, do you want to go out with your dad?" The little girl shook her head hard, tears falling in streams, her lips trembling. Anyone could see she didn't want to go. Tusan turned to Sun, her voice calm but unmistakably resolute. "Let's save it for another day. She's too frightened." Sun froze for a moment, annoyance clearly showing on his face. But wanting to appear composed in front of Tusan, he swallowed his anger and forced a smile. He set Ivy back on her chair, patted her shoulder in a half-hearted gesture, and said in a tone that tried to sound gentle, "It's okay. Daddy will visit you more often so you can get used to me." A chill ran down Tusan's spine. She didn't want Sun showing up whenever he pleased. She straightened up, meeting his eyes with clarity and firmness. "No. You can only see Ivy on weekends like we agreed. If you want to take her out, let Trang come pick her up. I don't want to see you." As soon as she said that, Sun's expression shifted, his eyes darkened for a split second. But almost immediately, as if he realized that losing his temper now would only push her farther away, he switched his tone completely. His voice softened in an unnatural, overly polite way. "All right, fine. I'll follow your wish. Next time I'll come at the right time. I won't bother you." His sudden gentleness caught Tusan off guard. Sun had never spoken to her like this before. It didn't feel sincere, it felt like something else, something hidden beneath the surface. Something that made her unsure whether to relax, or brace herself even more. In the days that followed, Sun showed up at Tusan's house so often that she began to feel exhausted. Sometimes he brought milk for Ivy, sometimes fruit, and on certain days he even asked about Tusan's well-being in a strangely familiar tone. Today, Sun came again. But this time, he carried a neatly wrapped gift bag, saying he bought it especially for Tusan. She looked at the gift, but all she felt was heaviness. Not wanting the uncomfortable atmosphere to stretch any longer, Tusan shook her head immediately and refused. "Don't do this anymore. I won't accept it. There is nothing between us. Please understand and stop bothering me." Sun froze for a second, then tried to act gentle, as if hoping to win back even a tiny bit of affection. That only made Tusan more uneasy. She spoke more clearly, her tone firm but calm. "I hope you'll find happiness again soon. But don't continue like this. I don't want it." The air between them grew tense. It looked like Sun wanted to argue, to explain himself, or to force her to accept the gift. But right at that moment, the familiar sound of a motorbike came from the gate. Trang, Sun's younger sister, stepped into the yard. When she saw her brother standing inside Tusan's house, surprise flashed across her face. "You're here again? What's going on?" Sun looked flustered but tried to hide it. He muttered something vague about visiting Ivy and then quickly found an excuse to leave. Trang watched his fading silhouette, worry clouding her eyes. She knew her brother's nature. Once he clung to something, he struggled to control his emotions. That fear made her genuinely afraid that Sun might eventually do something that would disturb the fragile peace Tusan had. When Sun was finally out of sight, Trang turned to Tusan and asked quietly, "Are you okay? Why has my brother been coming over so much lately?" Tusan sighed and told her everything, the sudden visits, the strange looks, the excessive attention, even the gifts, as if he wanted to revive something that was long gone. Trang listened, then held Tusan's hand gently, her voice sincere and tinged with guilt. "I'm sorry. I know my brother can be unstable sometimes. Don't worry. I'll talk to him. I'll tell him to stop. I promise I won't let him affect your life anymore." Tusan nodded softly. She felt a bit lighter, but worry still lingered in the corners of her heart. That evening, Trang sat down across from her brother, her expression serious, very different from her usual cheerful self. She knew if she didn't speak now, things would only get worse. She looked straight at him, her voice soft but resolute. She reminded him of all the times Tusan had quietly helped her in the past, from their hometown to the city. How Tusan had given her the right guidance, helping her avoid a life-changing mistake in her relationship, and how, thanks to those very words, she eventually found her true happiness with her current husband. Trang spoke with genuine gratitude. Without Tusan's intervention back then, her life might have taken a completely different, painful path. Her voice trembled as she continued. "Brother, San is a good woman. A very good one. But she's been hurt too much already. Please don't drag her into more trouble. You and she have no fate left, she deserves peace. And so do you. You need to find your own happiness, someone better, someone who fits you. Don't keep hurting yourself." Her words weren't accusatory or angry, they were sincere, gentle, and honest enough to silence Sun completely. For the first time in days, he truly reflected on himself. He remembered Ivy's terrified eyes, Tusan's cold avoidance, and even his own confusion every time he saw her. And suddenly, everything he had done, following her, clinging to her, trying to revive an old hope, felt pathetic and childish, to the point that even he felt disgusted with himself. Trang held his hand, her voice softer and heavier. "You used to be the brother I was most proud of. I believe you can be better than this. I believe you can change." Sun lowered his head, silent for a long time. Finally, he let out a long breath, as if releasing something heavy that had been weighing on him for days. He nodded slowly. "I understand. I'll stop. I won't bother Tusan anymore. And I'll try to be the brother you used to be proud of." Hearing that, Trang couldn't hold back her emotions. Tears streamed down her cheeks, not out of sadness, but out of relief. She was grateful. Because at last, her brother was willing to look at himself, to let go, to change, to stop hurting a woman who had suffered far too much already. In that very moment, as Sun made his promise, Trang tightened her grip on his hand and silently thanked the heavens that he had finally taken the first right step for his own life. After a sleepless night of tossing and turning, Sun lay in bed with his mind drifting between old memories and Trang's words. He didn't know how many times he changed positions, nor how many times he sighed. In the past, Sun had never truly reflected on what he had put Tusan through, never once tried to place himself in her shoes. But after hearing Trang recount every small thing Tusan had done for her, every piece of advice that had saved her from a completely different life, Sun, for the first time, saw the quiet compassion that Tusan had once given his family. And the more he thought about it, the more something tightened in his chest. It turned out that all those years, she hadn't just been his wife. She had been the one silently holding together parts of his family, things he had taken for granted without even realizing it. That morning, before the sunlight had fully climbed over the fence, Sun stood at Tusan's door. He didn't bring any gifts, no bags of fruit or milk like before. Only 2 empty hands and a heavy expression. When Tusan opened the door, she couldn't hide her surprise. Sun was standing there, not smiling, not forcing friendliness, just quietly saying, "Tusan, today I just want to talk to you for a moment. That's all." His voice was low, so different from the forced politeness or arrogant tone he used to have. After a few seconds of silence, Tusan stepped out into the yard, keeping just enough distance to avoid feeling uncomfortable. Sun looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of regret and longing. He took a deep breath as if gathering courage, then spoke, for the first time with a sincerity so deep his voice turned hoarse. "I regret it, truly. I regret losing you. But after hearing what Trang told me about everything you did for her, I realized that I never knew how to appreciate anything. I was too careless, and maybe I really couldn't give you happiness." A light morning breeze brushed past the porch, carrying the scent of grass and earth, making the silence between them even more fragile, so quiet they could almost hear each other's heartbeat. Sun lowered his head and continued, slower this time. "I'm sorry. During the years you were my wife, you suffered too much. I didn't see it. Or maybe I stubbornly refused to see it. Thinking back now, I was awful. You deserve a better life, a better man than me." His words felt like a gentle cut through Tusan's heart, not because they hurt, but because they were unexpected. She once thought she would never hear such words from him. But today, his eyes held no anger, no stubbornness, only the late awakening of a man realizing his mistakes after too much time had passed. Tusan stood still as waves of emotion slowly rose inside her. She remembered the years living with Sun, the cold meals, the nights she cried alone while holding her child, the loneliness so deep it felt like being abandoned. But she also remembered how, through those same years, she found her strength, stood up on her own, raised her daughter, and rebuilt her life. Finally, she looked at Sun, her voice soft but steady. "I accept your apology. And I sincerely hope you'll find happiness for yourself. Don't hold on to the past anymore, because honestly, I've let go a long time ago." At her words, Sun felt something inside him loosen, like a knot finally untied. He nodded slowly, as if finally understanding what he should have accepted long ago. "Thank you. I won't trouble you anymore." He said nothing more, turned around, and walked away. His steps were no longer hurried or heavy, as if he had finally let go of the thing he had been gripping so tightly these past days. Tusan stood on the porch, watching Sun's figure grow smaller under the soft morning sunlight stretching across the dirt road. A gentle breeze brushed past her hair, carrying with it a rare sense of peace. She wasn't happy because he apologized, nor sad because of the past. She simply felt light. Light in the way of someone finally closing a long, heavy chapter of their life. A small smile curved on Tusan's lips, a smile of release, of peace, of a woman who knows she deserves happiness.
Hello mọi người, rất vui được gặp lại mọi người trong video của mình. Chúc mọi người có một ngày mới an lành và hạnh phúc. Mình hy vọng rằng những video của mình sẽ mang đến niềm vui cho mọi người mỗi khi xem. Và video hôm nay kể về câu chuyện của người mẹ đơn thân Lý Tiểu San. Sau khi gặp lại chồng cũ là Sơn tìm mọi cách để tiếp cận Tiểu San với hy vọng là quay lại với cô. Nhưng nhờ những lời nói tận đáy lòng của Trang, những người đã được Tiểu San cảm hóa, thì Sơn cũng đã dần thay đổi và anh cũng không bị ràng buộc bởi quá khứ. Hy vọng rằng Sơn sẽ sớm tìm được hạnh phúc cho mình, và Tiểu San cũng vậy. Hy vọng rằng mọi người đều có hạnh phúc riêng và suy nghĩ khác đi, đừng để quá khứ kéo dài đến hiện tại. Cảm ơn mọi người đã xem hết video hôm nay của mình. Hy vọng rằng sẽ gặp lại mọi người ở video lần sau nha. Xin chào và hẹn gặp lại mọi người.